Okay, folks, so this week I start off with an empty first-person project. Okay, and what we're going to be looking at is particles. Okay, so we're going to build up our own first particle system to kind of it's going to replace our. Hold on, if I press play here, instead of firing out this bouncy ball thing, we're instead going to fire out a kind of particle bullet type thing. So that it looks a bit nicer. So, folks, there's two different particle systems on Unreal. I'm only going to go through one of them. There's one of them called Cascade and one of them called Niagara. The one, if you go into FX here, you see these are all Niagara effects. They're quite a bit more complicated to work. So we're going to go with the kind of simpler particle system, which is the default particle system. Basically, it's the basic type of particle system. So this is a Cascade Particle effect. If you do that, I'm going to call this bullet. Yeah, bullet is fine.
Would you be able to mostly use the same stuff in Unity? Would it cross over pretty smoothly?
Yeah, the same stuff pretty much cross over to Unity. If you remember, I'll show you in a second once we look at the particle system here. Did we look at the particle system game tools a little bit? We did touch on it, didn't we? For the spooky Halloween thing, we had a pumpkin or something like that. But similar concept, slightly different implementation. So if I open this, I'm just going to dock it up here. Okay, this gives us a custom particle editor. And what this is showing here is it's showing these kind of crosshairs being emitted and fading away upwards. Because that's kind of how we're starting off. Basically, it's showing that there's no texture or anything being emitted at the minute. So this is our basic particle. It has some simple kind of properties over here. We can click on here and we can change. Sorry, if we click on this. Sorry, if we click on the required component, we can see the material is here. This is the default particle material. It has some things like duration, delay, stuff like that. We'll tweak a couple of these. And then it has this stack of effects. So there's things like the way the particle is going to spawn. It has the lifetime of the particle, the initial size, initial velocity, and color over life. We can right click and we can add in other things here. Like if we wanted to, one thing we'll be doing maybe in a while is rotation. We can do that. We can generate light out of the particle, which we'll be doing as well. Okay, so it's like this stack of effects. We can layer one on top of another. And we can have multiple, this section here is the emitters, and we can have multiple of those kind of along here. So one particle effect can have multiple emitters, basically. So the first thing we're going to do is, I'm going to open up Paint. If you've got Photoshop, it might work a bit better for you. And I'm going to set pixels to 512. Does anyone know why I use a number like 512? Yeah, it's a power of 2 number, especially with particle systems where this is going to be instantiating it repeatedly again and again and again. Power of 2 numbers are a little bit easier for to compute. They're a little bit just more efficient in terms of how the GPU or CPU will handle them, basically. So I'm going to hit OK. I'm going to get my paint bucket. I'm going to paint the background black. Did I say the background back? Right then. But basically, does anyone know why we have a black background? Anyone want to guess? Yeah. We can set black to be transparent, yeah. Okay, so this is going to basically be our alpha channel. So anything that's in black is going to be transparent. The more white it is, the more visible it's going to be. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Why would you use black instead of something like the lime green? Sorry, not really matter.
Yeah, it'll tend to just default to black. I'm not sure if there's a good reason for it. You can set up in, this is just going to be a simple JPEG or BMP or something. I don't know what Paint saves as. But this is going to save as a very simple image. If you save this as a .tga, a Targa file, or a PNG, it has a separate alpha channel. And the reason, basically, that alpha channel will go from black to white, which is 0 to 1. That's just a reason, basically. All white represents 1, which is something that's rendered fully. 0 represents all black, which is not rendered at all, which is transparent. Something 50-50 is 50% transparency. Does that make sense? a color that's halfway between black and white. So that's why we use black or white. Yeah. 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 If I don't know, I think we'll still be able to hear it. It's only in the stairwell. I was listening to it earlier and I couldn't figure out what it was. Luckily, it's not anything to worry about. Fingers crossed.
Fire alarm.
Okay. Now, if you're good at like visual art and you want to like create a cool particle, I'm going to create like a blob particle effect. But I do not have a drawing tablet or anything with me, so I'm just going to select one of these like brushes. I'm going to select the marker one. I don't know if this will make much of a difference to what I'm doing. I'm going to set my color to white, and I'm going to set to draw this polygon shape with the marker outline. Okay, and this is just, it doesn't matter what sort of shape this is. Oh, hold on, wait. Sorry, I need color 1 to be what? Oops. So I just want some sort of slightly irregular sort of shape like that. And I'm going to get the paint bucket and just fill it in. Is that okay? Now you'll see, it might be hard to see it here on the screen. Because I went for a marker effect, you might be able to see there's some slight shadowing there, and we'll see that in Unreal. If you can do a smooth edged, if you're using Photoshop or something, using a smooth edged brush will actually look a bit better. You know, just some soft edges basically so it blends a little bit as it reaches the outside will look nicer. So I'm going to hit save on this. I'm going to save it here and I'm going to call it blob.png. I'm going to jump into my pictures folder, drag this into Unreal. Oops. And there is blob. Okay, we can see there it's just created a texture. So this is a 2D texture. It's not yet a material. Next week we're going to be going more in depth in materials. For this week we're going to create a simple, just show how to basically set up a material to work for the particle system. So I'm going to right click on this and hit create material. And this is going to be called, I'm just going to put like an underscore in front of this so that it shows up on the top of my list. I'm going to call it underscore bullet. And I'm going to double click this to open it. And we're going to see what it looks like here. This is the Unreal Material Editor. I'm going to click this icon here for a plane to switch this from being rendered as a sphere so that it's rendered as a plane. The way particle effects are rendered is that they're all rendered as like planes, basically. So they're all like flat. And that's how we want to kind of see it inside the inspector. Okay. At the minute we have this. There's a couple of things we're going to want to do. This material by default, on the left hand side in the details panel, it is set to blend mode opaque. We can change that to masked. Okay, so blend mode here on the material on the left hand side details panel, we can change that from opaque to masked, and that's going to allow us to use the black area of the map as a mask. So we can just drag from this RGB pen into the opacity mask. And then, yeah, cool. That takes away our background. Okay, does anyone know one thing we might want to change here as well? If this is a particle effect and we walk around this side, yeah, we can set this up double-sided here as well. And it's just this checkbox here called two-sided. And as we rotate around this, basically the particle exists as a two-sided particle in space. Okay, so we can see it from multiple angles. Okay. Now, one thing I want to be able to do with this is to be able to tweak the color from the particle system. So the particle system is going to be able to control the color of this. And we need a new input node here. So if you right click in space and start typing color, I just want to make sure. Yeah, good. So it's this one here called particle color. It's a constant. Okay, so if you search color, you should see particle color. And what this is going to let us do is take the particle color from the particle system and it's going to apply it to this material basically. Does anyone want to guess how we're going to get this color to affect this texture sample? We want to combine them in some way. How do you think? Anyone want to guess how we combine them?
We add the blob thing to the particle system first.
Yeah, we're actually going to multiply them because like our white is 1 and our black is 0. If we multiply this by a color, we're just going to get that color as its intensity. Does that make sense? What's going on there? Cool. So I'm just going to drag out this channel here, which is the overall RGB color, and I'm going to type in multiply, and it's going to give us math multiply. That's my A value. So I'm multiplying the color input data by the texture sample, and that is now going to give us a new base color. Okay, it's not going to look any different here in the inspector, but we now have a color or a material that's going to take its color from the particle system. Okay, I'm going to hit apply and save just to make sure that's all saved. And now I'm going to jump into the bullet particle material, or the bullet particle, sorry. And I'm going to click on the required component, which is the top section of the particle emitter. This is like the stuff that's required of basically this is like the default behaviors a particle system needs to have. The material here is currently set to default particle, and I'm going to change that to my underscore bullet. And what you might find is it's pretty hard to see what's going on. So if that's the case, sometimes you can hold down L on the keyboard and click in this window. Cool. One thing I'm going to do just to make this visible is I'm going to put a right click here. I'm going to add a light and just a light component to this particle system. Cool. There it is. Now I found it. Now you can hold down L on the keyboard while clicking in this view, and you're going to change the direction the light is coming from. So that arrow there represents where the light is coming from. Okay. So the first thing what did I do there? I think that's okay. Hopefully that hasn't broken anything. Uh-oh. I got to select this initial velocity, and it has this start velocity value here, distribution. You don't have to worry too much about this. This is like doing a uniform vector distribution. It's like basically distributing it equally. And here you can see that the Z value is kind of currently controlling the way it's distributing. So I'm just going to change this Z value to 10 and this Z to minus 10. Okay, and now we've something kind of like it's like a little explosion type effect. Does that make sense what we've done there? We've changed the way it's starting out the velocity so that it's just emitting a sphere of these particles. It's no longer just sending them upwards basically with an upwards velocity. Okay, we got this cool kind of like, even like this as a simple like kind of smoky style particle effect. We've got something kind of interesting, but we can make it even nicer. So the next thing I'm going to click in is color over life. And then there's this color over life section, distribution, constant curve. And I'm going to explain what's going on here. It's got a 0 and 1. Actually, okay. This distribution 0.0 is basically, we can have multiple points, but I'm just going to work with 2 for now. Any more points just gives us more places along a curve. But basically 0.0 is the start of the particle. That's when the particle is born. 0.1 is the point where the particle dies. Does that make sense? Okay, so if we want something to start off one color and then go another color, then we're going to be able to control it through this. So 0 is the start. This out val here, we can click on, it just lets us set a color. And we're going to start off with this kind of maybe like quite a bright reddish color, I think. Or actually, sorry, we'll want this orangey, won't we? I think like the center, when a fire starts, it's quite orangey, I think. And hit OK. And you'll see there they're being created kind of orangey, and then they're going back because 1 is still set to white. So we'll kind of go for a reddish color. Hit OK. I'm going to go for an even more kind of yellowy orange here. Cool. And so hopefully there you can see that effect starts to take shape. Our particle kind of has some cool sort of character. It moves from being this orangey color at the start to a reddish color. Next thing I'm going to do is click on the light here. The light component that I added. And I'm just going to uncheck this use inverse squared fall off. Okay, and it's going to start looking much cooler once we do that. Okay, this inverse square fall off is to do with like how the light falls off when it gets further away from the center of it. But this particle effect is going to look a bit nicer if we do it like this. So I'm going to save this. And I'm going to jump into the blueprints for the first person projectile. It's going to open up and I'm going to go to the viewport. Okay, this is our first person projectile. This is the kind of tennis ball thing we're creating. So I'm going to add a component here. And it's going to be a particle system. Not Niagara particle system, just a default particle system. And it says here particles template. We can set that to be our bullet particle system. Okay. The one thing we want to just do is select the sphere. And I'm going to turn off visible on it. Cool. And there's our particle system at the center of this bullet. I'm going to save and compile. Now if we jump into this game, cool. It already looks way better, right? Instead of ping pong ball, we've got a cool kind of particle effect. There's a few things we're going to want to do. Like at the minute, the particles are a bit like kind of spaced out, which basically means it's not emitting enough of them. We're going to want to create like tiny little particles and smoke as well. Okay, so we're going to like just make it look even nicer than it looks right now. But the particle system in like Unreal is quite nice. Like you can get nice effects. You can see there, like it's pretty quick to get quite a nice effect. Where am I here? Cool. So this initial size I'm going to select. I'm going to increase the start size of these particles a bit. I'm going to set them to 100, 100, 100, 100. Okay, just because I kind of want them to be a bit bigger, basically. And then the spawn, all right, in required, that's all fine. Just gonna check the lifetime of these. We can increase or decrease the lifetime if we want. Yeah, spawn rate here. I'm gonna increase this to like 50 because the way they were spawning there, they were like too spaced out, so I'd like more of them being spawned. Because this bullet moves kind of quickly, I want them spawning a bit quicker. Then I'm going to select this emitter, I'm going to right click, go into the emitter menu that shows up, and duplicate emitter. Okay, and we now have 2 particle emitters. So I'm going to change the color over life on this one to make them a little bit darker. And I'm going to change the initial size to maybe 15. Cool. So we now have two emitters. They've got initial size, initial velocity, and they look kind of slightly different from one another. Okay. So now if we save and press play on our game, it should start to look. Cool. So one thing we probably want to do there is change the size over lifetime. So at the minute they stay the same size throughout their lifetime. We're going to want to change that. So we have initial size, color over life. We can come down here to size by life. So we're going to set them to be maybe a quarter their size as they get older. So 0.25. And we'll hit save on that. And we'll see how this looks in game. Cool. That's starting to look a bit nicer. I might have created too many of them, but it's fine. It's okay. We can turn off the light on this one as well if it's a bit too much. So just by hitting the checkbox beside it. You see, all this stuff is just things we can kind of tweak. Yeah, but I think that's starting to look a bit nicer. So the other thing we're going to do now is create some smoke. And to do that, we're going to duplicate this first particle emitter. And I'm going to turn off the light component again. The color over lifetime for this one, I'm going to start off kind of whitish, like a whitish grey, and then go to quite a dark grey. Something like that. Okay, and you can kind of see all the colors kind of mixing up inside here. So if we hit play on this, we now kind of have smoke being added into the particle effect. Yeah.
Could you show how you put the particle into the particle to spawn in the gun?
Yeah, so all it is in the first person particle, in the first person projectile script, in the viewport component, basically adding a particle system as a child of the collision component and setting the particle material here to the bullet particle we've just created. Cool. So we can play around with this a bit more. One thing we might want to do is make the smoke. We can delay the smoke so that the smoke doesn't appear right away. That it kind of follows the bullet basically. So this is the smoke. I think if I hit required. So there's this delay emitter. So I'm going to delay this by 0.5. So this is the smoke is going to arrive like 0.5 seconds after the bullet is created. And cool. That should be fine. We hit save. Yeah, we see the smoke starts to come a little bit later in the bullet's trajectory. One thing we might want to do is at the minute the sort of small particles that are being emitted, we might just want to change their velocity a little bit. So I'm gonna like set that to 50, 50, 50, and then minus 50. Okay, and now these little kind of particles are going to be emitted outwards. And if we hit save and press play, yeah, that's quite a nice effect, the way the particles. Cool. Cool. So like you can see there, and like we can, let's say if I, where did I create this? We can also like see this in the sort of scene view by just putting it in, and we can press play and walk around it and look at our effect basically. And we can sort of see the rate it's doing things at. Okay, but for a very simple drawing, we get quite a nice effect. I'm trying to think, is there anything else we want to add in? One thing we might do to this first one is add a bit of rotation to it so that it's not always like orientated the same way. And to do that, we just right click, rotation, and we can select initial rotation. Cool. So this initial rotation now is between 0 and 1, basically, which I think is from unrotated to fully rotated. And if we press play, we should see that instead of all of those particles being the same effect, they're kind of slightly different. There is one more thing we can do with the spawn. I just want to see if I can remember how we do it. Is the only question. So if we set the initial emitter origin as -10 or something, it should emit these smoke particles kind of behind the bullet. So it's slightly offsetting the effect. The one thing I'm going to do as well with the smoke particles, they're a bit too big at the minute. I just want to make sure. So I'm going to invert the values here. Basically, so they're going to start off at 0.25. So the smoke particles are going to get bigger over time instead of smaller. We'll see how that looks. Okay, I think that's starting to look a bit better with the trail of smoke and stuff leading afterwards. I really hate the way it looks when we get like really close to it. Does that make sense what we're doing there, folks? We're generating all these different, well, we're using the same particle effect, but we're getting a really nice overall effect of different things going on. And like, If we wanted, we can even go into let's say, where is the first person projectile? We can create a cylinder. Okay, we can do something like this. We might want to put a texture on this. So let me jump in here and grab a texture that I downloaded earlier for exactly this purpose. And we can now set the material on this to and we just want to make sure that this is, we might want to make the particle system a child of this. So we need to change the orientation of our what way? We need to rotate it. I think it's this way. Is it? I was tempted to download like COVID gifs and put them on the boxes, basically. But yeah, this is basically the kind of thing we can do. Fire rockets of our lecturers with trail renderers behind them. But yeah, that shows you kind of like what we can do with the particle effects and kind of tweak them and add them to blueprints and stuff like that. Are there any questions on that? No. Okay, cool. So what you'll be doing in the lab is trying to recreate that sort of effect with your own particle, and then creating an explosion effect for when you walk inside an area, basically to trigger it through a blueprint to play once. Okay, is that all right? So we'll take the 15-minute break here. We'll be back at 5 past. All right. I'll get this video up on